Hi there, my name is Ronaldo Mgotiso. I'm an energy analyst here at Marine Economics and was part of the project team that produced our recent research output focusing on Secunda and Sasolburg's decarbonization, as well as the petrochemicals value chain as a whole. This was an 8-month project, which it was initially incubated from a series of work we did investigating analytical resources that were available in considering the just transition decision making in South Africa. In the notes that we produced as part of that previous work, we argued that policymakers needed additional resources to those offered by techno-economic decarbonization modeling studies that currently exist, as well as additional types of knowledge and ways of integrating these. This project experiments with approaches that respond to those requirements, aiming to contribute a different type of analysis to those that form the mainstay of the South African decarbonization analysis. So we produced this large resource output in July, and that was followed by a webinar where we just discussed and briefly summarized the project outputs and key insights that we produced for decision makers. But thought it would be best to have a recording of me navigating my way through the research output, just to give a feel of what this output can provide for those who are interested in engaging with it, and also just a way of helping people to navigate through, because we've had challenges in the past. But yeah, also to note that we will be producing a microsite soon for those who are interested, to engage, to enable a wider set of readers to engage with it, taking away the need for people to download the large presentation. But thought I could also just summarize the main points of the output as well, as I take you through it. So yeah, let's jump straight in. So Secunda and Sasolburg are high-emitting and interconnected industrial facilities that deliver systematically important products to the South African economy, mostly in the transport and chemical space. This project considers the challenge of decarbonizing the two facilities and their value chains, providing a structured way for decision makers to engage with the challenge, one that is inclusive of multiple knowledge dimensions and perspectives, and which foregrounds current realities and future uncertainties. This project asks, what do we need to understand about these complexities to make optimal decisions as a country over the coming years? As I mentioned, this project was incubated through a series of short grants, whose outputs included a briefing note reflecting on whether appropriate analytical resources are available for decision makers interested in engaging with the just transition. A key objective for our project was to experiment with methodology for looking at the decarbonization issue. A big chunk of the time was spent developing a method that could be used to investigate decarbonization of other emitting assets, and ensuring that our approach is readily applicable in both developing and developed country contexts. We also experiment with different innovative ways of capturing the work and presenting it in more dynamic and interactive ways. And I'll discuss the detail of the methodology a bit more later, but just to note that we did produce a paper that focuses and discusses the method in more detail that can also be found on our website. To house the output of this extensive research and analysis, we created an interactive nonlinear presentation aimed at providing an accessible and engaging experience for readers. It is done in this way in the hopes to improve the communication of the complexity of the space and present the work in a more palatable way. We are also in the process of producing a microsite, as I mentioned, to help with the flow of housing this this dense piece of research. So as you can see, we've structured it into 4 different sections. The introduction and structure houses the project objectives as well as a summary, and also a way a brief description on how to use this presentation and how to navigate your way through. We also then obviously speak about this method, understanding where our starting point being investigating decarbonization plans from Sasol and also other techno-economic modeling outputs that have been produced that obviously investigate this issue in further detail. And then a lot of the sort of analysis and research can be found in the petrochemicals value chain section. As you can see, if you look at this like map, this tree, essentially, a big chunk of the work is under the techno-economic value chain tree, where we unpack upstream, process, and downstream elements of the value chain. And finally, we have the insights for decision makers section at the end, where we summarize key insights for those interested. And yeah, so this essentially, you can navigate your way through to this table of content using this icon, which we found on the top left of all the sections. So I'll show you, you can use this arrow on the right, bottom right, to navigate your way through the sections. And then you can also see a banner at the top where you can click through to the different sections. So if you want to, you obviously had methods, but if you want to jump through to the petrochemicals value chain, you can click through here. And you can use the arrows to go across. You can, if you see cursor indicators here, that means you can kind of click on the bubbles. So not just this political one, but all bubbles that look the same. So you can click here for the techno-economic value chain, and similarly you can click on these bubbles if you want to dive deep into the more detail around the economic value chain. But then at the higher levels, you can essentially find a summary of that piece of research. But if you want to deep dive into the different sections, you can see the cursor will indicate to you that things are clickable. So coal, electricity, hydrogen, sustainable carbon, gas. You can click on either of these to find more information about these topics. And as I said, you can find the table of content structure if you click at this icon on the top left. So Charles, it's, I guess, important to understand what we studied exactly. And so I will take you through some of the content and also show you how to navigate as I discuss. And I think a good place to start is just unpacking the value chain and where our research and understanding began. The project focuses on petrochemicals, liquid fuels, and chemicals, a relatively understudied yet significant area for South Africa from both a carbon and development perspective. Our starting point was to understand the processes, focusing on Sasol's large emitting assets. Our starting point was to understand processes focusing on Sasol's large emitting assets, Secunda and Sasolburg, and their value chains. We then explored the web of interlinkages across the value chains, centered around the facilities, including the primary feedstock elements for production such as coal mining, gas fields, and associated gas transport and pipeline infrastructure, and national electricity generation infrastructure, which is obviously currently largely coal-fired. This is a stylized depiction of the value chain, which doesn't illustrate to you the web of interconnections and detail of infrastructure and significance of Sasolburg and Secunda in the context of the wider value chain. But it is important just to acknowledge the supply chain and geographical importance of Secunda and Sasolburg. For example, if you click through here to Secunda and Sasolburg overview, you see on this map that there's a significance in that Secunda and Sasolburg are located in the Mpumalanga region, and for example, for the gas industry, all the gas in the country is supplied to the country comes from Sasol, fed through to Secunda from Mozambique through the Ramco pipelines. This is then used as a feedstock for Secunda processes and Sasolburg, but then also outputs produced, such as methane-rich gas, are then fed through the Lily pipeline to Richards Bay and Durban. This is, and obviously for other uses of gas across South Africa and across the value chain. So this is, I guess, an illustration of its significant and geographical importance. And similarly, with regards to liquid fuels and Natref in particular, their refinery, this is the only one located in the Highveld, where all of the other ones are located on the coast. Another example of its significance is how Sasolburg is a central hub for the chemicals sector. And Sasol is a key industry player with downstream linkages into chemical and end user markets, providing essential goods for the functioning of the economy and modern living, such as medical supplies, clothing, building materials, cleaning, and hygiene products. In many cases, Sasol is the only domestic supplier of individual inputs and products. In the synthetics, fuels produced at Secunda and gas procured by Sasol are widely used in the economy for use in transport and processes within power, industry, and residential sectors, which is concentrated in the Highveld, as I described earlier. And looking at the downstream elements, or considering the downstream elements, end users of Sasol products, as well as the industries whose future depend on the evolution of the petrochemicals value chain. In this study, we consider the activities associated with the transport sector and liquid fuels, including demand-side decarbonization options, and the chemicals markets, chemicals production by not only Sasol, but by other companies. So now I will take you through to just discuss a bit more the decarbonization plans and the techno-economic models that we explored as a departure point for our study. So see, if you see an arrow with a circle around it, it essentially takes you through to the higher level. And then if you reach the main slide of the heading of the section, this arrow will then take you through to the next section, being the transitioning SA's petrochemicals value chain. But yeah, just as I mentioned, let's just investigate and understand the decarbonization ambition for Sasol. So our departure point for understanding appropriate decarbonization ambitions for Sasol was that of their own decarbonization goals that they have expressed, and whether they were at least Paris aligned. We drew on Sasol's own decarbonization communication to help understand their decarbonization opportunities. And whilst Sasol's communications are from a corporate perspective, as opposed to a national policy one, they contain valuable insights into what decarbonization might technically be possible over time. We then had a thorough interrogation of two of the most two of the most important techno-economic pieces to come out in modeling analysis, that being the UCT, ESRG, and NBI studies investigating net zero pathways for the petrochemical industry. So let me just take you through to where we discussed those. Over here, you can see the ESRG modeling deep dive and the NBI modeling deep dive. These have played an important role in forming SA's policy discourse, providing a critical techno-economic tool for helping to understand the pace and depth of the decarbonization challenge and the direction of travel required. We started with a deep investigation of models exploring assumptions and recommendations that were provided and developed. These can be summarized into three stylized pathways, as I had illustrated. Take you back here. What this exercise revealed was that the difficulty to condense the intricacies of decarbonization into a simplified pathway, starting from the route one, where we consider a closure of Secunda at the end of 2035, that being the extreme point, and looking further into other opportunities where there is room and runway for Sasol to decarbonize into producing outputs that are green, such as green hydrogen and other sustainable products in their chemicals, byproducts, etc., etc. But where the models do help is to provide a departure point for understanding the potential systemic implications of decarbonization pathways. And as part of our analysis and research, I'll just take you through to our information sources. We engaged with a variety of key stakeholders across the value chain, engaging with representatives of these stakeholder groups, particularly civil society, with a focus on just transition and environment, labor, with a focus and interest in workers' rights in the transition, grassroots, representing underprivileged communities in the vicinity of large emitting facilities. We engage with government, we engage with business who have an interest in the future, in the existing and future evolution of the space, and finally, asset managers who are responsible for directing investment flows and managing investor risks associated with the transition. We also explored a wide range of publicly available literature and reports, and that can be also found under information resources. We have a reference list of all the information we got out of literature, as well as if within each section we have hyperlinks at the bottom that take you through to the actual source of the information. To structure our findings across these information sources, we used a framework called PESTLE to help organize the content into the political, environmental, social, techno-economic, and legal dimensions. This framework has been widely used to help structure understanding perspectives that have the potential to impact organizations and industries in a range of contexts. PESTLE is used here to describe the decarbonization challenges facing the facilities and their value chains from each separate perspective. So yeah, I'll take you through now to obviously the techno-economic element, but just to touch on other elements, if you go, we investigate the political dimension, and here you can see a variety of issues that we grapple with that are in relation to this issue. particularly around Sasol's political economic origins, contextualizing where they sit politically and their significance in lobbying in the energy space. Yeah, we understand the governments around their energy transition, et cetera, et cetera. And similarly with other dimensions such as social, we do the same in understanding and unpacking issues related to the decarbonization and how it intersects with society. As may be expected, the bulk of the analysis and information was gathered under the techno-economic perspective. This reflects the overwhelming focus on techno-economic analysis in the literature and the disciplines making up the project team. So if you click here, you can dive deeper and like as was shown before, we have a depiction of a stylized depiction of the value chain, but we go into a bit more depth into all the different elements upstream in the process and downstream. But in order to understand that a decarbonized Sasol, what a decarbonized Sasol look like, we really had to dig into understanding the existing processes. So this has become quite an extensive resource for understanding the process flows. We explored the production taking place at both Sasolburg and Secunda, detailing the interlinkages and process flows through simplified diagrams of current production and in the decarbonized world. Mind you, it took us quite a while to collate our understanding of the intricacies of the different processes. And we go into quite a bit of detail explaining these different processes for each of the facilities. And as mentioned, we explore what a future Sasol might look like. And this can be seen in this section and summarized in this flow diagram. The existing techno-economic modeling studies reviewed in the study, together with Sasol's decarbonization plans, reveal the shift that will be required in the petrochemicals value chain in the transition to a Paris-aligned net zero future. In future, the makeup of the upstream inputs will change as the facility decarbonize. Future inputs are likely to include green hydrogen as an energy carrier and process feed for your Haber-Bosch processes and your Fischer-Tropsch reactor processes. Sustainable sources of carbon as feedstock for the production of green hydrogen derivatives, and swapping out fossil fueled generation with renewable energy being a significant one. Process changes have, of course, significant implications upstream and downstream. For example, we unpack the downstream effects on the transport, liquid fuels, and chemical sectors. And if we look into the transport sector in particular, we explore potential opportunities related to sustainable aviation fuels. And we also used a conceptual tool that's called the Avoid, Shift, and Improve concept to organize our framework of thinking around decarbonization of transport demand as a whole. We'll need a collective effort to decarbonize the transport sector through shifting to public transport, as seen here, shifting to rail, and improving access to electric vehicles, and supporting an economic shift to sustainable aviation fuels. This can only happen with the support. This can only happen with a supported transition to green hydrogen that could potentially be developed using existing processes within Secunda and Sasolburg. So with all my jumping around, you can see that the study is broad rather than deep, focusing on interconnections rather than necessarily providing all the detail on specific activities. The emerging decarbonization picture foregrounds uncertainty and interconnection, reflecting back the complexity of a developing country context and challenges. The project reveals a mesh of multi-dimensional interdependencies and contingent choices related to decarbonizing the petrochemicals value chain. Different parts of the value chain may transition faster or slower, influenced by events that may be techno-economic in nature, but may also be political, social, or environmental. It is with this in mind that we present the key insights of the project, a selection which we find most significant for policy and decision makers engaging with these issues. Decarbonization as an objective on its own is relatively easily achieved, but the real challenge of decarbonizing whilst expanding the opportunity for inclusivity, prosperity within 3 decades is an unprecedented one. There's no single pathway for Secunda and Sasolburg's transition. Instead, the decarbonization requires stringent and ongoing evaluation of the steps taken along the way. Governments and social partners will need to evaluate the progress of achieving ambitions set out by Sasol themselves. It will require multiple perspectives of knowledge and understanding to expand and unpack the different pathways that Sasol and the petrochemicals value chain has in sustaining the industries in the context of South Africa. The ubiquity of uncertainty and the rapid pace of global change demands a particular way of engaging with the decarbonization challenge, requiring a shift in what is valued in decision-making, such as responsiveness, experimentation, innovation, failure and learning, and the creation of options and resilience. Thank you so much for listening in, and I hope that this kind of gives you a sense of the depth of what we have available. Just one more note is that you can click onto each of these bubbles just to get a bit of more understanding of the key insight as indicated here, and hoping that this can be a valuable resource to anyone who's interested in this issue, and further the thinking around understanding decarbonization for other high emitting assets across other industries and in other jurisdictions. So yeah, many thanks for you for listening and getting this far.